Living right in the middle of this jungle was an elephant. He was massive, with thick tree trunk legs and a shadow that could cover an entire clearing all on its own. But he had a serious flaw. He was completely obsessed with his own muscles. He spent his days admiring his massive physical frame, entirely convinced he was the most important creature alive. Every single morning, he would stomp through the bushes and shout to the forest, declaring that no one was stronger than him. The smaller animals would scatter, terrified of his heavy footsteps. Because he could push over a tree or lift a heavy boulder, he drew a dangerous conclusion. He believed physical size was the absolute only measure of power in the world. Down on the ground, barely visible next to the elephant's giant toes, lived a tiny ant. One day, she had finally heard enough of his loud bragging. She crawled right up to him and politely but firmly told him that he was wrong to boast so much. She explained what the power of the mind truly means. This stylized scale shows the concept perfectly. If you place a heavy boulder of physical muscle on one side, it drops down. But if you place a glowing brain on the other side, it completely tips the scale. Intellectual weight is actually heavier than physical force. The elephant burst into a booming, deafening laugh. He looked down at this little speck of an insect and openly mocked the very idea that she could teach him anything about strength. His laughter echoed through the trees, setting the stage for the ultimate test. The jungle was about to see exactly what happens when thousands of pounds of muscle goes up against a single sharp mind. The ant knew she couldn't arm wrestle the giant, so she chose a strategy that completely avoided a physical fight. While the elephant was still chuckling to himself, she quietly and stealthily began to climb up the rough, wrinkled skin of his massive front leg. She made her way all the way up his face and marched straight into the dark tunnel of his giant trunk. Inside, she simply started walking around. Instantly, the elephant felt an intense, scratching, uncontrollable tickle deep inside his nose, a spot his giant legs couldn't reach to scratch. Panic set in. He shook his heavy head, he stamped his massive feet, and ran wildly through the trees. But all those thousands of pounds of muscle were completely useless against a tiny tickle. The monkeys, the birds, and the leopards peeked out from the leaves and burst into laughter. They were watching the biggest bully in the forest get completely dismantled, without a single punch being thrown. One clever, well-placed action from a tiny insect had entirely neutralized the most overwhelming physical strength in the jungle. Finally, completely exhausted and out of breath, the giant elephant collapsed to his knees. He blew his trunk and begged for the torment to stop. The ant crawled out safely, dropping to the grass. She looked up at the tired giant and reminded him that physical size has absolutely nothing to do with capability. He finally understood. He stopped stomping through the bushes to scare the others, and instead became a quiet, humble friend to everyone who shared his home. He had to learn the hard way that being small does not mean being weak. When we look at how the ant actually handled that situation, we see she didn't try to grow bigger or fight with force. She used her intelligence to find a path the elephant never expected. It is a reminder that a person's worth isn't tied to the size of their shadow. We should never dismiss someone just because they are smaller or look different, because often the smallest voices carry the most important insights. Real strength appears when we pair that cleverness with a sense of fairness. This shield represents how a sharp mind and a kind heart work together. The ant was smart enough to win the fight and kind enough to stop once the lesson was learned. So when you feel small in a world that feels very big, remember the ant. You have your own brain magic waiting to be used whenever you face a challenge. If we look out for the smallest creatures and lead with our minds, we all end up living in a much better jungle.